You guys, what up? How's it going? Viper here, and today we have the super big topic of upcoming Illuvium Ascendant Arena balance patch, over 90 changes, and I want to go over it and want to elaborate a bit on what I think most of this will lead to, what I think this means, so that you are best equipped to check out the new meta and have a lot of ideas on if this happens, I do this, if that happens, I do that, and so on and so on. Further than that, I want to briefly look into the leaderboard rewards for the Ascendant Arena rank, because, well, probably everybody playing the game is really interested in that. So we'll briefly check that out, and then we will get right into the patch notes and, well, just elaborate a bit on what they mean exactly. So jumping briefly into the Illuvium Arena Ascendant ranked leaderboard rewards. Well, let's check out the distribution per ranks. So the, for you guys, interesting things are the first one, which is your rank. If you're rank 1, you get a 9 ILV per player. Well, if you're one player, then you get those 9 ILV, and this is weekly. So if you can keep rank 1, you would be getting 9 ILV per week. I personally hope that I can accomplish that. I currently am rank 1 on my main account, and I'm like 100 points ahead of rank 2. So I do hope that I can keep and maintain that rank. But yeah, besides that, you can see up until rank 1000, you get a weekly rewards. Well, the 500 to 1000, 100 to 500 numbers are not crazy high, but it's still weekly, and it is probably very easy to obtain those ranks. I don't think it's going to be too difficult to obtain like a top 100 or top 50 even, especially if you are really trying hard and essentially you're following my live streams and videos. I think that's going to be very helpful for you. Okay. Outside of the sellout part there, real quick, now you can see essentially just playing well and doing something is going to give you some rewards back. I think this makes sense because the rewards are not crazy high, which I think would just lead to a lot of like unsportsmanlike behavior and a lot of like weird things and whatever happening. I think these numbers make a lot of sense just for the sake of giving players a reason to play, giving players a feel of accomplishment, a feel of goal, because now rank 11 or rank 10 is a difference, so you probably want to play more games. Rank 51 and 50 is a difference, so you probably want to play more games. And it's similar to how, I don't know, in like a normal game, we progress through the ranked ladder and we get some in-game rewards or whatever. Now it's beta testing, there can't be any in-game rewards and whatnot. I think this makes sense. And the really relevant part on this that I really like, which is, I don't know, maybe it's just a roundabout way of making it because it's easier than actually like technically programming it in also, is that, well, you must be in the top 1000 players to get rewards, okay, play 25 ranked games, okay, whatever, and you must have played 15 ranked games in the week to receive rewards. I really like that, because previously the high elo ladder was a bunch of people who would play, I don't know, one day with new OP team, new OP whatever, climbed really high, and then just never play again for, I think there were some people that literally didn't play a game for 2 months. Some other people played for like 2-3 weeks, 0 games, maybe 1 or 2 games only. So I think that's really boring when you look at the leaderboard, and people just don't have to play, don't have to fight in a new meta, don't have to fight in a new patch to maintain their ranks. So now you have to play 15 games a week to receive those rewards, which incentivizes everybody to play at least 15 games, even in high elo. And I really like that, very happy about that. That is, I think it's really healthy, especially for the top end of the leaderboard, that people actually are in a position where they are supposed to be playing games and not just supposed to be sitting on some elo so their name appears on the leaderboard. Very happy to see that, and I think that's like my main takeaway on this. You can check out the rest of like rules for fair play, rating resets, and so on and so on. I think all of this pretty much just makes total sense, but it's not the main topic of the video. I just wanted to briefly look into this, and I think I've overtaken my brief time already. So let's check out the Illuvium Arena patch 0.3.4. It's over 90 changes, so we're not going to deep dive into every single change, but there's a lot of fundamental themes that go overall. So we'll quickly check out stuff and highlight those, right? So here there's like an easy change, right? Dodge chance on the ability of the anti-interline is reduced dramatically. This makes sense. The only way to counter a spore if you position poorly, if your positioning happened to be poorly into it, which, well, came down to like a 50-50 or 1 in 3 or something oftentimes, was to have a counter augment, or you would just lose to it. So I I think this is a really good change if you play auto attack based teams. Otherwise, a Spore is just a too big of a counter on Vermilion especially. I like this as like a fundamental change overall in a lot of Illuvial lines that I think is very correct, that I was surprised to not see in immediate design, but I think there's a lot of reasons for that are, I don't know, pretty valid as well. I don't want to dive into that. What I mean is the stun duration from Scarab, Bogoline, and Titanon not being the same on every stage. I don't know, just from like, I don't know, a gamer sense kind of thing, it felt weird to me that Scarabog's stun, which is the main utility part of this unit. It's not the stats, it's not the health pool. The main thing, like to me, when I see stuff like this, in especially a like an auto battler kind of setup, is the utility of the tank unit, the utility being the stun duration, and stun duration of Scarabog and Titanon being the same seemed off to me. Now that is the same thing in other units, I think with Twine and Null, etc. It's also adjusted. Yeah, I like this change. I like there being more difference in the different stages of Illuvials. Same damage reduction part added to the Illuvials Omega. So also this is scaling with the stage, making the higher stage Illuvials more powerful. I think this is one of the overall themes that we see in this patch, that the current metagame usually was evolving around playing like 2 or 3 higher stage, higher tier Illuvials, and you giga buff them with augments, and you giga buff them with base affinities and base, there's just base traits, right? Like Earth gives grid resolve to the team, Bulwark gives resistance buffs to the team. So you play really cheap Illuvials that unlock those teams and the buffs for the team, and those Illuvials still have those really high stun durations and so on low stage, low tier, and they just hyper buff your big guys that get the augments, and then you just put like Indomitable and Vulnerable, things like that didn't care about the base stats of your Illuvials onto them, and that was kind of the meta game always. So that's one of the fundamental changes, and this is one of the examples for it. All right. Well, Turtle Line gets some more resistance. That's good. Turtle Line was pretty weak. Kuka Ref's enormous attack range is getting nerfed. I think that's very good as well. It could feel a bit annoying to play versus a, I don't know, guy that looks like a melee Illuvial, but it can stay super, super safe behind so many tanks. Then we have Alkaline. Alkaline is kind of the same theme, right? Making Omega power difference here. So from 10 on every stage to 8, 10, 12. And flat heal, well, slightly nerfed on Adorius, slightly buffed on Ador. Missing health, well, slight nerfed to Adorius, but Omega cast time is lower and it gives some more Omega power. I don't know. Overall, just like this adjustment with kind of going with the theme of stage 1 to 3 not having like the same utility number, like the same buff, same stun, and so on. Well, change to the damage formula here. I think this makes very, very much sense. It was really crazy that you could attack. You could use a lot of attack damage buffs and combine them with Omega power buffs, and the damage was just going crazy. That's like the Harbinger, Fusion Igniter, Umbra. Now it's the flat damage times the Omega power plus attack damage. So there's no multiplicative way of just getting more attack damage, more Omega power into crazy damage numbers. And Scorpion is getting changed to be more auto attack based instead of more ability based, because on 40 energy you would spend a lot of time casting your ability and not actually auto attacking, but your ability was very powerful. So are the Toxic and Berserker trait. So well, Scorpion, very, very good unit. I don't think we should be tricked too much by seeing all this red on these numbers, because I can see very much this change here makes, for example, Technoleecher a better augment on it, because it's spending less time casting a 40 cost ability and it can just get to 80 and then cast the ability once. It also means that our auto attack damage buffs on the Scorpion are far, far more valuable, because it spends less time casting an ability that doesn't actually do that much damage compared to the high crazy auto attack damage that Berserkers can scale into during the fight. So I think this is an interesting change. It certainly nerfs the ability a whole lot. Max health, physical, and energy resistance stats, slight nerfs. I think Ryplans and Ripteros are still gonna be totally fine units. Based on this, I think Ripteros probably more hit by the 7th fighter nerf. We'll see later. Pangolian line, I think there's overall a small buff to Flare, Singe, Seer. Kind of interesting. I think they're very, very good units already, but it's a small change, so don't have to go into it too much. Here we see the same thing, stage 1 to 3. Alfie reduces less energy resistance, have the same dual left slightly more. Overall nerf to the Pterodactyl line. Pterodactyl line, obviously very polarizing, and Illuvial, very polarizing thing. I also think this is We can get into this real quick. I don't know if you guys were following a lot of League of Legends dev things, and I don't know, every year or every few months or so, the topic of, for example, assassins is brought up. And in a MOBA game like League of Legends, the issue with assassins in particular is that on lower skill level players, those assassins can hit abilities that they will never hit versus high skill players. So meaning that if the assassins are balanced around the high skill players and only the abilities that they can hit versus those, normally speaking, then they would be completely insane versus the lower skill players, because then they hit all those bonus abilities plus the ones that they are supposed to hit anyways. And I think this is a similar thing here, where I believe these Illuvials are very, very strong into players that don't perfectly know how to counteract them, because this is a really big area of effect, and it's like, well, what do you really do against it? There are a lot of counterplay options, there are a lot of positionings you can do, there's a lot of augments and so on and so on and so on. There's stuff that you can do, but it requires a tremendous amount of knowledge, and if you don't have that, it is a bit difficult. So I think this is just like, I don't know, changes like this are in the sense with what I see in every video game ever, and it's like one of the fundamental things of you're playing the game with the same rules for every skill level of players, which is obviously going to mean, well, some things are easier to use or harder to counter. Therefore, easy to use is irrelevant at the top end of the leaderboard. Harder to counter is also irrelevant at the top end of leaderboard. But on the lower ends where people just jump into the game, they don't have all the knowledge available to them yet, it can be difficult. So I think this change goes into that direction. Don't necessarily think it would have been like a high elo change that was necessary. Then showbill line is the same thing with adapting the stage thing again, and overall making Blazer Knight better again. I think that's very reasonable. It is very cool to have a playable Wildfire Illuvial, because oftentimes I find myself wanting to put Blotto or Krunk in my teams actually. Blotto and Krunk feeling good, or considering what can I do with Wildfire, but Blazer Knight is just feeling too weak, so very, very happy to see this. Now we see similar changes for this line here. Fundamentally just slightly nerfing it, obviously. Very, very strong Illuvial, sees a lot of play. And yeah, I like the charm radius change, even though this number looks really, really small. I think it is very, very meaningful, because oftentimes it really is 1 or 2 hexes further or fewer, and you would be hitting or not getting hit. So yeah, I like this. Omega duration reduce is nice as well. It felt crazy long animation, so I like that. Then Taipan line is getting nerfed. I'm surprised to see the Fiery nerf. I never felt that Fiery was like that crazy a unit, but I guess maybe in some 7 Fire setups or similar it was doing insane things. I don't know, maybe it's just the adjustments to stage, because 35, 35, 35 to 25, 30, 35, probably also for future adjustment. Yeah, makes total sense. Scoriox being untouched is good. I think Scoriox was already having a hard time. Pretty big nerf to Zephyrus, makes a lot of sense, because Zephyrus was 55 cost Illuvial, that also was giving Granite trade, which is pretty a decent trade in, especially Invoker, kind of, because you can have Zephyrus tank some rogues, and it doesn't feel that bad if the rogues are attacking Zephyrus and so on. So yeah, Zephyrus just doing crazy damage, because Invoker scales your damage insanely high, and it guaranteed hits 3 enemies. So if this 400 number becomes like a 2000 number, because it's at 500 Omega power, hitting 3 enemies for 2000, totally crazy. So I think this nerf makes total sense. I'm pretty happy to see Ophisto having a lower casting time here. It felt very awkward that it was just so long. So happy about this. I think Invokers overall are still fine, by the way. Cardulox, whole Caradulo line is getting nerfed a whole lot. Makes total sense. Completely insane units. Taunt, complete insane ability. Fawns being also crazy. Like, I don't know, everything about this unit completely crazy. Water Bulwark, Toxic Bulwark, and Toxic Colossus also crazy strong early game traits, all of them. So yeah, happy to see this getting giga nerfed. Then we see the stage change, making Krunk and Blotto slightly better and different durational ability here. Makes total sense. I don't know how I feel about the Terrorbird line. I think we can come back to the same explanation on the Pterodactyl line, where from my personal point of view, like Bloom wasn't even very good in like higher end leaderboard, nor was it even playable oftentimes, because there was just too much stuff that hard countered it, like no chance of ever winning against it, that people were playing. I think my short take on Bloom as a synergy, the way it used to be, later on we'll see that it gets also heavily like giga nerfed to the ground. But Bloom as a synergy with the health region part was basically reading. It's relatively weak, like the first 16 to 24 seconds into the fight. But if your opponent cannot kill your team or cannot do like tremendous damage in the first like 24 to 32 seconds, then Bloom is just gonna pop off and be super, super insane. Because, well, it just scales throughout the fight. It becomes better the longer the fight goes. Now, I think this is like probably a game design balance, low high elo kind of problem, on a sense that if it is playable in high elo, it's always going to be completely OP broken in low elo, due to the fact that, well, if people play suboptimal teams, suboptimal positions, suboptimal augments, suboptimal just everything, right? Like obviously like if you don't play the perfect cookie cutter team with the cookie cutter augments, the cookie cutter everything, setups, trades, everything, you just don't do as much damage usually, or you just don't have as much defense. That's just a difference in like lower tier to higher tier meta teams. Well, then you don't hit the breakpoints of actually killing Phosphorus fast enough, or being able to defend long enough against it, because Phosphorus lost to either a very defensive team with a lot of healing and overtime, like Phosphorus as a standalone unit just did not do enough damage to kill a lot of things, or Phosphorus lost to enemy teams that had very much upfront damage and just killed Bloom before. Now, that again, it's like this high-low elo thing. I am a bit afraid that Phosphorus is just gonna suck in high elo basically now, but the Arcanite trade is still good, and I think I think Scoriox might still want you to put in a Phosphorus for a Arcanite buff later on. But yeah, like really, really heavy nerf to Terrorbird line and heavy nerf to Bloom that we can see later on. So I do not know if this is gonna be if this is gonna be like a playable Illuvial in the next patch at all, honestly. Very, very crazy nerfs there. Monkey Fighter line, a small nerfs. Monkey Fighter line, pretty insane. Omega hex radius on the splash damage, completely crazy. Like 28 hexes, I don't know. It's insane radius for the splash damage. Berserkers being very meta defining right now. Slight nerf makes a lot of sense. We see here the change for the stages. Makes total sense. I think Kling having a 1.5 second knockup duration seemed always very, very insane. Then we have big buffs on Polar Bear. Stat steal duration goes up by a stage, goes up more by stage, and missing health percentage goes up tremendously. I think this part always felt like it did entirely nothing, the missing health here. So I'd like to see this being a hopefully meaningful number now. We have a very immense buff to Frost. Activation time of Frost goes from 4 to 2.5 seconds. I think Frost as a synergy was already very much okay. There was like a lot of meta dependent and Illuvial dependent and augment dependent things that just gave the Frost Illuvials a very, very hard time. But yeah, not all of that is changed, not all of that is fixed yet. So just making the activation time this much faster, I like that a lot. Radius is also a lot bigger. I think Frost is going to be a very strong part of the next meta game. Just one of the really, really big winners of the patch, also in combination with Jotun being buffed, and we will see Behemoth buffs later on. Then Bloom, well, the health region is removed from the kit, so I think Bloom is just... It's just never a synergy that you bond with your Ranger anymore at this point. It's one of the weakest composites in the entire game, because like every 8 seconds getting like 120, 150 max health, that's... I don't know, it's just nothing. The synergy just doesn't exist anymore. You only play Malura for Vanguard or for Malura's effect, and you only play Phosphorus for Arcanite, or you only play Phosphorus for Arcanite. Like, I don't know. I think that's just what this change means. I think this is I don't know, I feel like it's too crazy a nerf. Maybe just leave it at like 5 or like some little number, but yeah, probably just also a just catering to player base, making everybody happy, in that sense that they had, like most people had a really hard time dealing with Bloom, like I explained earlier, that if you don't play cookie cutter perfect teams, this was a very, very hard synergy to beat. And if you were playing cookie cutter perfect stuff, then you were just farming it. So it was probably in a really bad state overall. And yeah, we'll see how this one plays out. Then Dust is essentially getting buffed, even though the numbers look red here. but dust units blind and reduce Omega power for enemies in the medium area during their Omega. So Gyro is gonna start Omega, roll to the other side of the board, blind everything in its way. The Ranger is gonna, like a Slayer Ranger, is gonna start casting, blind everything around, and jump somewhere else, blind everything around. Essentially, Dust is a lot better than it was before. I don't know if it will see play. It might be, Gyro might be good at countering auto attack melee based teams now though, because blind is a very, very strong thing with auto attack based teams. Nerf to Spore makes total sense. Spore was either you had a counter to Spore and it was useless, or you didn't have a counter and it was OP. So certainly makes sense to nerf that. Tsunami obviously makes sense to nerf Tsunami. Very, very strong. I think it also makes a lot of sense to nerf the energy gain on hit for Mud, because the Mystic Monkey and also the Predator Monkey just benefited tremendously of this, and there's probably a lot of Ranger combinations that would be very, very insane with 7 energy on hit extra as well. So I would say this is to some extent also a preemptive thing on the 4 trait especially. Yeah, nerfing Toxic makes sense. Toxic probably the most insane early game synergy in the entire game. Happy to see this nerf. Maybe Toxic early game openings are not unbeatable anymore. Buff to Wildfire makes total sense, right? Wildfire was just pretty weak. Buff to Shock. I think it's interesting because Shock Invoker was already essentially what we played. Shock Invoker was already pretty strong. So I don't know, it's a very, very minor buff, so I mean, I don't mind it. I think it makes sense. Maybe it makes Squiz and Octeus more playable. Deep Sign stage 1 and stage 2 Shock Illuvials, because I don't think this changes how we would and do anything with Ophisto basically. But yeah, maybe it changes for the smaller versions. Very heavy nerf on 7 Fighter. Yeah, I wonder if that is like a really necessary thing, if it should be like that heavily nerfed. But I can see 7 Fighter being a very oppressive thing if it is very good. So it's probably just makes sense. Like if it is nerfed too much, you can just higher up the number a bit, sure. But it might be just a very obvious, very super strong thing. So it makes total sense to do this. It's like a very unfun thing to play against, right? If it is too strong. Yeah, we see some buffs to empaths again. Haven't really been seeing empaths, haven't really been feeling the need to play or try empaths in anything really. So I think it makes sense to make the trait slightly better. It's probably the thing, right? Empaths was just very toxic and horrible to play against. Just delete it from the game. See, is it still playable? Yes, no, no. Make it slightly better until it is playable. I think that's a reasonable approach there. Nerfs to Bulwark trait overall. Bulwark trait, one of the most broken, insane things in the game, because Quantum Nullifier Augment is bugged and doesn't actually reduce the bonus resistances that, for example, Bulwark gives them. So yeah, I think seeing this like a 20% nerf across the line makes a lot of sense. Really, really happy to see that. I don't know if it's enough. We probably still play Bulwarks. I don't know if this will mean that Colossus is going to be the preferred frontline, or if some Empath or similar, but yeah, it's probably still going to be 3 to 5 Bulwark and some other stuff. Maybe we will see more Colossus. Honestly, I do think we will see more Colossus, but the issue with Colossus is that Toxic got nerfed, and usually if you play Colossus, you try to play Toxic Colossus, at least for the early game. So I'm a bit worried on the strength of Colossus openings in the earlier stages compared to just Bulwark openings, where they are cheaper and they allow you to play your damage Illuvials plus augments quicker. Nerfing Psy makes total sense. The same as 7 Fighter. Psy, especially 5 to 7 Psy, very, very uninteractive, unfun to play against, very, very low skill, low agency team. Yeah, very, very happy to see this nerf. Wouldn't even mind nerfing it more. Just, I don't know, I can see it should exist and so on, but it's like, again, very low agency, low skill, and I think it's very unfun to play against. I think it's very, very polarizing as well. So it kind of just like, yeah, it should, like 7 Psy shouldn't be a good thing, I feel like. Without like an emblem or some weird scenarios and so on. Enchanter, a slight nerf to Enchanter, makes total sense, right? One of the big things on Enchanter was the combination with Tsunami. It wasn't actually Enchanter itself that felt that insane. So now that Tsunami is tuned down, it's going to be interesting, but we'll revisit that in a sec. Mystic, slight tune down. Invoker, heavily tuned down. But it's the same as like why I want to revisit Enchanter and Tsunami once we get to the Augment section a bit. I don't actually think this matters too much, and I'll explain later. So I think, yeah, Enchanter, Invoker, Tsunami, all of that is still going to be fine. A heavy nerf to Templar. Ice is not that heavy. The 2 Templar trait, which is the one that we can access right now, only from 5 to 4, but this is still like a 20% nerf essentially. So yeah, I like to see this with Blazer Knight being buffed, taking some of Templar away. Then Behemoth is getting a new effect added every 4 auto attacks you cleanse. I think this is very, very massive with things like Frost seeing a buff and things like Behemoth just being notoriously weak to a lot of debuffs, and yeah, just like anything that was... Everything is hitting Behemoths because they are melee Illuvials. They stand in all the CCs and roots and blinds and. So adding a cleanse, which removes all those debuffs from them on every 4th auto attack to the Behemoth trait, very, very massive. Very happy to see this. I hope that Behemoth is going to be playable. And then Vanguard Illuvials, also big buff. They now get a shield on crit. The number might not seem that big, but keep in mind, Vanguard Illuvials also get 25 crit chance for 2 Vanguard already. So every second auto attack is going to give you this shield. There might be some very strong combinations with Mystic here, or just, well, it's a lot of effective health added to your Illuvials. It makes something like a Slashin that has an attack speed buff very, very tanky compared to before, where it probably kind of felt like lacking a bit overall. So happy to see this trait, this trait changed. Okay, now to the biggest part of this. Starting this patch, we are introducing the augment limitation feature, meaning that only 1 augment per line can be added to the team via Team Builder. So you cannot play stage 1, 2, and 3 of the same augment in your teams anymore. Now, this is what I meant when I said people saying Tsunami, Enchanter, Invoker, I mean, okay, they don't really saying that about Invoker, but Tsunami, Enchanter especially being like really bad next patch, because also the Ranger Gauntlet, we'll see that later, also is getting nerfed like pretty heavily. I think they are wrong, because the meta currently was most teams to some extent at least playing triple biogenic suppressor and playing 2 or 3 techno leechers in their team to counter the energy based teams that were so strong. Now you can only play 1 of each of those augments in your team trying to counter them. And if we want to check, for example, biogenic suppressor, which was the best counter augment, the energy reduction, it gets nerfed from 16 to 12%. So in the last patch, you had 8 plus 12 plus 16, 36% energy reduction gain on the enemy energy-based teams. Now you only have 12. As well, I think Tsunami Enchanter, Invoker, all the energy-based teams, Psion as well. Psion was less impacted by this because they just had like 1 big wave of first casts, and then I don't know, either the enemy team kind of had died or didn't, and that was like how they won or lost, so Psy not too impacted. But Tsunami Enchanter or Tsunami anything pretty much, Invoker as well, that wanted to go cast into cast into cast, very, very quick things. I think they will be fine, because this is helping those teams very, very much. Now, on the Invoker side though, Invoker kind of never really has a lot of augments that they were super happy about playing. So maybe this is a bit awkward that Invoker has to struggle finding playable augments, but Invoker can also just transition to a different frontline and just different Illuvial setups, because Invoker was leaning towards a cheap team that on turn 4 you had all your Illuvials in play, right? Like maybe Invoker just swaps out the cheap Bulwarks for Colossus and such, and Invoker is gonna be fine. Some of the Tsunami Enchanter teams were playing a lot of very expensive Illuvials with the Mystic versions and such. The 5 Bulwark version might want to adjust to some more late game Illuvials as well at that point. So yeah, I think this change is benefiting mainly very, very positively energy-based teams. Okay. Yeah, then we could go over all the augments. I think the video is already getting really long, so we'll just do this very briefly, right? Charge capacitor getting slight nerfed was obviously very good with, was only good with Ramfire and 7 Psion pretty much, but it was incredibly good in those. Overall, the theme here is that the power level of augments is getting tuned down, probably trying to incentivize us to play more of this idea of we play a cheap early game composition and then we change those cheap early game Illuvials into our big late game Illuvials, compared to how the game currently was played, where it was like cheap tanks / utility plus carries, carry augments, utility augments / frontline augments, and that's your team. To the idea of probably cheap team, more expensive Illuvials, and slightly supportive augments maybe throughout the way. So yeah, we'll see if that actually will play out that way or not. Razor Simulator, one of the augments that gets only nerfed very slightly. So I can see this being one of the top tier augments here. Quantum Nullifier is still bugged, so I just disregard this as an existing augment. The bug with this is it doesn't reduce the bonus resistances as much as I understand, as far as I understand it. Which, well, if you want to counter units that have a bunch of bonus resistance, this doesn't do anything. And if they don't have a bunch of bonus resistances, it's just not that effective overall. So yeah, augment is whatever, my opinion. Maybe, I don't know, maybe you can just like throw one in there because all the augments overall are a lot weaker, and if you reduce like a 60 base resistance down to a 30 base resistance, it's not nothing, it's okay. Yeah, if you have like a lot of free slots, sure, but yeah, it's very heavily negatively bugged. I think this change on the reworked effect makes a lot of sense long term, because refunding 20 flat energy was pretty much entirely useless on everything except maybe Scorpion and maybe Phosphorus before it got nerfed to 70 energy cost. So yeah, like that makes sense. It was just an unusable thing. 20 energy was pretty much useless. Now its energy cost percent as energy, which, well, it was 20 on the highest stage, right? So 12%. It still doesn't sound great, but hey, it's like on a 200 energy cost Illuvial, now you get 24 refunded. So overall, it's probably a nerf, but yeah, I don't see this being like playable, to be honest. But augments overall are a lot weaker, so yeah, maybe it makes a cut. Slight nerf to attack speed augment on stage 2 and 3. I think this is interesting because there's no linear scaling anymore. It's not a 15, 23, 30, making the 20 cost augment just like in power level, like in quick power, more interesting. The same thing we see here with the neogenic thing, where the 20 cost augment is just like more money efficient than the 40 cost augment, and the 40 cost augment is more just like raw late game power efficient, I guess. I like these changes because if we can only play one of the augments, I'm not defaulted to I always want to play the 40 cost one. Very happy about it. That makes like sense. Because overall, I'm not too much a fan of... if the augments would still have the entire linear scaling, I would be very much not a fan of like being only allowed to play one. Because I think then like you're just incentivized to play high cost versions for higher late game strength if you can't like close out the game early game consistently. So I don't know, it would just feel like you add a lot of variance, a lot of unnecessary RNG to the team building by just like, well, versus this guy I would need the 40, versus this guy I would want the 20, versus this versus this matchup I want to move my unit for 10 coins this turn, but then I can't play my 40 cost augment, and well, previously I could have had a 30 and 40 and I could have still made that move. Now I can't anymore. So like I think that would have been like for the like competitive top end of gameplay, it would have been a very negative change. But if the 20 to 30, 40 cost augments are not linearly power level scaling anymore, if there is more of a reason for playing especially 20 cost ones, I'm pretty happy to see this so far, at least without having played it, obviously. Yeah, nerf to Siphon Matrix makes sense. I don't know why Graviton Piercer after 6 attacks. I don't know. I'm pretty unhappy to see this. I think it should just work from the beginning. I have been using this augment a little bit, and it was oftentimes pretty hard to justify Graviton Piercer over things like the pure damage, honestly, but the pure damage is getting like 50% nerfed, right? Crazy nerf on that augment. So I don't know, maybe from testing Invokers or something like that, Graviton Piercer was just way too good if you didn't need to do 6 auto attacks, because 6 auto attacks, that like heavily leads me to believing this is about Invoker, honestly, because, well, after 6 auto attacks, if you play a bunch of like energy buffs, then actually I don't know what, maybe it's just some arbitrary number, who knows. It makes me lean towards, though, that you want to especially nerf science stuff. Because for like a Scoriox and so on, the auto attacks before it uses its Omega, they don't matter that much. Maybe it's a nerf to Behemoth as well, because the 4th Behemoth auto attack is not just this insta-strong damage nuke, it's only the 8th auto attack that's gonna get the Graviton Piercer buff. So yeah, maybe you wanna tune down Behemoth, maybe tune down Invoker. I don't know, like a weird change to me, but sure. Nerf to Vitality Veil, pretty insane augment on a lot of Illuvials. yeah, remake on this so that either you get a team-wide buff or you get a single unit buff, and single unit buff is nerfed heavily. Team-wide buff I think is really interesting. This is probably a staple augment in most teams, just for the sake of like, well, it's just usable and you can only play one augment each, so you have a lot of space. Photon Ripper, same interest. I mean, it's getting giga nerfed, right? But if you look at 24 to 15, that is a far lower nerf than 48 to 25. So it's going to be interesting if we see like a lot of 20 cost Photon Rippers is just put in a lot of teams or not. I don't know. Yeah, I like this theme of 20 cost one. Then Redemption Core, certainly with all the other changes in the game and all the meta affecting things, I think it makes a total sense to go 60-40. Then reworking Synergetic Field from a team buff to only within 25 hexes. I like this a lot. It felt very toxic against especially 7 Scion, that they all just immediately casted their ability while they were able to be spread out on the entire board. Parasitic Link, now the main change here is that the second bonus number of allies is only 1 ally instead of 2 allies. So it's a lot worse if you play some dual carry team like we had with Phosphorus 5 Rocks or with Mankea, Ripe Plants and so on. I think it makes total sense. Augments overall are tuned down, so this was a very insane option there. Then another big thing is that Reactive Deflector and also Indomitable are pretty much changed from invulnerable and you can't die to just damage mitigation percentage-wise, making those far worse and far less, I guess, one-sided and oppressive sometimes as they were before. I would say my issue with a lot of the Indomitable and invulnerable thing was not necessarily the existence of invulnerable and Indomitable, but that it led to, I mean, first of all, you could have one single frontline unit, like one single Cardulox, and that unit just tanks the enemy team for 15 seconds, which is a bit dumb, I guess. I would agree with that. The second part is it just led to coin flips late game very often, because is your Indomitable invulnerable unit in front of the enemy carry, or is it not? Do you win the round or do you lose the round? And it oftentimes just made all the other things that happened previously in the game irrelevant. So you could have made 10 out of 10 decisions correct, but you lose this last coin flip on your guy is in front of invulnerable and Indomitable. Maybe you don't die after losing it once, but you die after losing it twice. So people could make a bunch of bad decisions throughout their game, and then they just win the positioning left, right, flip, which it really is. It's just a flip, and just mitigate all the previous mistakes that they had made by winning 1 or 2 coin flips. I think that was a really annoying design. Happy to see that changed. Biogenic, obviously insanely strong augment, makes sense to nerf that again. I wonder though, because Biogenic was always, if it was used as triple stacking the augment. So I don't know if not only allowing 1 per team would have been enough of a nerf to it, if you can't triple stack the augment anymore. So I wonder if this is like too much and energy-based teams might be too strong. The crit damage part of this augment was never used. The tech damage part makes total sense. Nerfing the Omega power gain, I don't know about that. I don't know about that. I mean, the only unit that ever used this was Phosphorus, and Phosphorus got like completely nerfed to the ground in every other regard in the game imaginable. So yeah, I don't know. Like everything around Phosphorus got nerfed so insane, and it was the only unit that used this augment, so I don't know about that one. Temporal Safeguard, instead of triggering on every Omega, it only triggers every 2 Omegas. I don't know. It was like, it's again, and there's only 2 Illuvials that used this augment, I believe. Maybe 3 if we include Axodon every now and then. So I don't know if like that's like a crazy nerf to it. I don't know if that's like needed, to be honest. I believe there's like a typo here with the durations and so on, but yeah, that's like about it. I don't know, it's heavily nerfed, but yeah, maybe there's still no better option in the game. Could be. Fusion Igniter, same adjustment where 20 cost is just like linearly speaking for the points that you have to spend better than the higher stages. Yeah, I like that. Fusion Igniter overall, same as Razor Simulator, not getting nerfed too hard though. So I think this is going to be one of the carry augments that we probably play. Photonic Unity, I'm kind of sad to see the crit chance part removed. honestly, but it makes total sense. I think the crit chance and crit amp buff was insanely strong late game, and just incredible damage buff that you got from this augment, giving both crit chance and crit amp, scaling every few seconds. If you played 2 or 3 copies of that augment late game, I think the energy gain or mega power part was pretty like irrelevant before already. I don't think that was very strong, honestly. So yeah, seeing energy gain removed or mega power slightly buffed, it's fine, but it's also like kind of whatever, I think. Maybe I'm underestimating this, I don't know. But yeah, I don't think this is like that big a deal. Especially if you can only play one of the augments, because I feel like this augment was only good if you could play 2 or 3 copies as well to reach some like critical mass breakpoints. Nano sequencer is getting nerfed all across the way. Very strong augment, makes sense. Well, this again, instead of indomitable, you just get damage reduction, and you still cleanse. So I don't know, maybe this is still a really good augment. I can see the survival protocol being very strong in combination with redemption core, probably, because you reach 40% HP, then you get health regen. You reach 25% HP, you get a cleanse and damage debuff. So maybe that combination plus having healing Illuvials behind your tanks can be very, very good. Then Fortification Catalyst, apply on allies to apply on teammates. Allies meant not including the holder, and teammates means including the holder. The augment is also not getting nerfed that much, and most other augments are nerfed pretty heavily, and you can only play 1 augment each, so I think this is probably going to be played in a lot of stuff. Then range up Scion weapon is getting nerfed. I guess the major change is from 700 to 525 and from 26 Omega power per cast to 19. It should still be really good in Invoker, because in Invoker it was just super overkilling enemies anyways, to be honest. In Tsunami Enchanter and similar teams, well, I don't know. It is kind of interesting. It certainly is a pretty big damage nerf to it. But everything in the game pretty much got nerfed, right? It's not that only Tsunami Enchanter got nerfed, only Gauntlet got nerfed. Like, a lot of other things in the game got nerfed. A lot of augments got nerfed. You can't stack augments anymore. Like so much is just nerfed that I think it's not that bad. It is not that bad, and I think it's a very, very big deal that you can't triple stack biogenic anymore, and you can't combo triple biogenic plus 2 or 3 techno natures anymore. So yeah, my hot take on this is Tsunami. Some Tsunami Enchanter based thing or Tsunami based thing only maybe is still gonna be really good. Maybe Tsunami Invoker even. Who knows? Tsunami Invoker really suffered under Tsunami Enchanter with all the energy counter augments just beating you by being the cheaper team and playing more energy counter augments. So I can really see Tsunami Invoker as well now being a lot better, because they suffered most from these energy counter augments. Swords get slightly buffed, very good for Behemoth. I'm currently even thinking of playing some Berserker versions, as it's going to be interesting. Berserker Riplans probably also better than before, because it's not wasting time using the ability and it's just auto-attacking more. Yeah, water weapons have lower energy benefits than they used to have. Water weapons always started with more energy and had a lower max energy cost than the other weapons. Let's look at, for example, what's a good example? Gauntlet is probably a good example. Gauntlet used to be 82 to 118, so you need only 36 energy for the first cast, and after that only 118. Now it's a 73 and 127, which is 54 for the first cast, so yeah, that's a lot worse. But yeah, it's probably okay. It was like a really OP thing. And then there's a bunch of bug fixes. Okay, so I think the video was like way longer than I initially thought, but it is 90 changes to the game. So here we are. And yeah, we have this fundamental theme that stage 1, 2, 3 in Illuvials. Stage 1 ability doesn't really offer the same utility on most Illuvials as stage 2 and 3 anymore when it comes to things like stun durations, or Omega power buffs, or energy resist reduction, or again, knock-up duration, attack speed buff, damage reduction, blind duration, and so on, everything across the line, right? So that is one fundamental change. Then the second fundamental change is only 1 augment of each line, which is, well, you can't double stack charge capacitor on Ramfire anymore. You can't You can't triple stack HP buff to team. You can't double stack attack speed debuff. You can't triple vitality value invokers with triple indomitable anymore, and so on and so on. And then the second fundamental change to augments is that they don't scale linearly anymore, or a lot of them don't. Whereas here it would be 15, 23, 30. Now it's a 15, 20, 25. So the 20 cost version is essentially more efficient for the amount of mastery points that you spend. In terms of the buff that you get, but you get a overall not as high of a buff anymore. I like that change a lot because we pretty much just always defaulted to almost always 40 cost versions, just due to the fact that giving strong Illuvial strongest possible buffs just multiplied the damage, and it was very unlikely that it would be more beneficial in many scenarios to have a cheaper version of those augments in your team at all. So I like that, and especially in the sense of that only having one augment per line in our team anymore. So just having a few 20 cost augments in the team so that we can decide between 40 cost augment and 10 or 20 coins for moving plus playing an augment is not as punishing, because, well, if we would still be preferably only playing 40 cost or mainly 40 cost augments, then only playing one of them as well would mean, well, we'd probably just play a bunch of 40 cost augments. And if we have to make a move, then making that move means we don't play the optimal augment, and it would be very punishing. So at least having some comeback on that, on having 20 cost augments be more strong, more reasonable to put into our teams, seems nice. I wonder how this augment change is going to be. Yeah, on some of the augments, I'm a bit afraid that, for example, again, holding down energy-based teams was mainly due to, like, we played energy-based teams even though there was triple biogenic suppressor and double techno leecher in a lot of teams. So yes, they got nerfed, but also the counter to them got a giga nerfed by just allowing one biogenic suppressor and one techno leecher, as far as I understand. I guess techno leecher was not touched at all because it's not here. Maybe techno leecher got removed from the game. I'm honestly not sure, because I'm surprised to not see the augment here. But yeah, if you made it this far, you're certainly very interested in Illuvium, you're certainly very interested in the leaderboard and getting good at the game. So I suggest checking out my Twitch channel. I'm streaming pretty much every single day. Currently holding rank 1 on my main account. I'm almost 100 points ahead of rank 2. So yeah, if you want to learn about the gameplay, you want to learn about how to rank well and so on, check out my Twitch, and see you guys over there. See you guys in the next video. Bye bye.